Ladies and gentlemen, another TerrazzaStampa appointment this evening, a special guest from London, England, Matt Bishop, a journalist, a man that worked in Formula One as chief media manager of McLaren, renowned with W Series, the series of the women at the wheel. So we have many teams to talk about. I think we can start with the old journalism. You have been the director, the journalist, the person behind the car review 93, 95 and the Formula One racing, and one of the most known Formula One journalists. So let's talk about that experience and those beautiful years.
So I started in Formula One as a journalist in the mid-1990s, 25 years ago. Very different Formula One, fantastic time, you know, wonderful drivers. Just about at the end of the time when Ayrton Senna was, of course, racing, and then Michael Schumacher, Mika Häkkinen, and so many others. And it was a great time, of course, prior to the internet, prior to social media. So being the editor of a magazine at that time was a very exciting thing, because one was really very much in control.
And with television, the only way to speak of Formula One, no web, as you have told, different way.
Exactly. No web, no internet, no social media, just newspapers, magazines, and television and radio. And F1 racing and autosport, I worked for both. I was the editor-in-chief of F1 racing, and I wrote columns, and I was group editor of autosport. I had a fantastic time, 11 years, until I joined McLaren. But that's, we can talk about that later if you like to. But yes, it was great. It was great. And F1 racing, fantastic magazine. I hired some great people. Peter Windsor, brilliant journalist. Tom Clarkson, very, very good journalist. Darren Heath, fantastic photographer. Many others. And of course, we began to translate our stories and our magazine into foreign editions. So there were a Spanish edition popular when Fernando Alonso arrived on the scene. But already it was popular with Pedro de la Rosa.
And it was a different way to approach with the pilot too. It was a different Formula One world to work in.
Completely. You have to remember, it was controlled completely by Bernie Ecclestone and Max Mosley. Political was about Ferrari. Obviously, all those teams are still in existence. None of them dominant like they were, none of them. And the teams that have been winning since, obviously Red Bull did not exist. Mercedes did not exist. You could say it was Tyrrell. So yes, it was a very different world, more political. In my view, the car's more fantastic. You know, I don't criticize current Formula One, but for me, the cars are too big, too long. They're fantastically fast. They're an amazing challenge to drive, but they are too big and too long. Whereas the cars in the mid-90s and even into the early 21st century, for me, were fantastic, beautiful, fast, challenging. And if you talk to drivers who have driven in those days and across to modern times, like Jenson Button, for instance, who I worked with for many years, or indeed Fernando Alonso, they will tell you that the cars around 2004, so 16 years ago, were the fantastic challenge, were the greatest cars they have raced.
And which was the way to follow a Formula One weekend? Respect to the modernity, or in the experience you had in McLaren?
So when I joined McLaren, and that happened because of the very difficult situation in 2007, which many of your viewers will recall, which was called Spygate. And that was the controversy between McLaren and Ferrari and the FIA, when a McLaren engineer, Mike Coughlin, was caught in possession of 780 pages of Ferrari IP. So I joined McLaren at that point, really. Ron Dennis invited me to do so, to assist him with that very difficult problem, which I did do, which we may talk about before. But prior to that, you know, we were editing a magazine, and it was a great magazine, and we just tried our best to report the Formula One races and do the interviews and do the photography and create the magazine in the best possible way that we could, in the most accurate way that hopefully we could. We always sometimes make mistakes, but you do your best. And we did create a magazine that was, for the first time, if you like, what we would call a lifestyle magazine. So it was sport, it was motorsport, it was motor racing, but it was also lifestyle. So we used to not just report on who was on pole position, who overtook whom, who won the race, and who's going to leave which team and join which team. We also took the drivers, we interviewed them at home, we interviewed them doing activities. You know, we went water skiing with the drivers. We went up Mount Everest with Alex Wurz. Not all the way up, but some of the way up.
Yeah, yeah.
We did various things, mountain biking with drivers, fitness challenges with drivers, driving classic cars, not just Formula One cars. I remember getting a Ford GT40, obviously a beautiful 1960s car. And it was at the time when the Jordan team was using Ford engines. So we got Giancarlo Fisichella, who was a Jordan driver, to drive the Ford GT40, and he loved it. He absolutely loved it. And we began to make stories that the drivers looked forward to doing. Rather than just sitting down and being interviewed and being asked difficult questions, we would say, do you want to drive a Ford GT40, 1967 car? Yes. Good. We will bring a photographer. And we created, you know, a magazine that became, well, it won awards, it was successful, and I was very lucky with the people I hired who helped me to make what I really enjoyed making as a great magazine, I hope.
This is something impossible today, because I see, staying in the weekend of Formula One, there are two different worlds, separates, one away to the other, and I think it is an aspect that should have to change. What do you think?
It can't happen now. Yes, it can't happen now. Of course, I ended up working for McLaren, and so I was often saying no in that changed role. But one of the reasons it can't happen now is all of these things I'm talking about were before the invention of the internet. And one of the reasons it did happen before was the sponsors loved it. The sponsors loved our magazine, and they used to tell the teams, please get your drivers in F1 racing. It's the best-selling magazine. Our logos, our names will be seen on the overalls in this magazine that is selling millions of copies all over the world. So please say yes to their requests. Now they don't do that, because the sponsors would just like the drivers to appear on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and wherever else, and mostly social media, therefore. So if you go to a team and say, can I have access to your driver for half a day outside of a Formula One Grand Prix weekend, They will say no. They will simply say no. In the past, they used to say yes, because it was an opportunity for them, the team, to do something that would please their sponsor. Now their sponsor just wants Instagram.
Yeah, it's so. And we can appreciate in a bad way in the circuit that is impossible to be close to the drivers and to the other people, because trying to speak with an engineer, the team say they are speaking with the engineer, something going out. No, in the test pre-season and then all over the season, impossible. But another word, we have social, we have internet, and we have people that have started in that year, in those years, and have right now their career following like a young pilot when he was inside Lewis Hamilton. What about him in those years and in this year?
So I worked with Lewis Hamilton. I joined McLaren in the end of 2007, beginning of 2008. Ron Dennis invited me to join, and I did join. And of course, 2007 had been a terrible year for McLaren. Okay, they won 8 races. They nearly won both World Championships, although they were disqualified from the Constructors' Championship, but not the Drivers' Championship, because of the controversy around Spygate and the Ferrari IP issue. But the 2 drivers, of course, were Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton. Fernando Alonso immediately left, went back home. I always say the team at Enstone is his home. Whenever he's in trouble, he goes back home. He's gone back home now. Next year, he will be back home. So he went back home after the difficult 2007 season, and I arrived at McLaren, and our drivers were Lewis Hamilton and Heikki Kovalainen. Heikki was quick, particularly in qualifying, and a very nice guy, but not at the same level of Lewis. This is no disgrace. Lewis is one of the greatest drivers we have ever seen. So it is no insult, no criticism of Heikki Kovalainen to say that he was no match for Lewis Hamilton. In fact, on Saturday in qualifying, he was often very, very close, and sometimes even closer. But on a Sunday, no. Lewis was majestic. And you have to remember that the McLaren team at that time was a very difficult place to be, because the year before, the team had been fined $100 million, and it had survived, but only just. And it was a frightened team. Even the great Ron Dennis was nervous, worried, and everybody connected with McLaren was so relieved, just relief, that we had managed to stay in business. And then we went down to Australia for the first race of the new season, Melbourne 2008, and we won. We won the race with Lewis Hamilton, and it was the most extraordinary experience. And that whole season, in fact, working with Lewis Hamilton very closely, was a fairy tale and an extraordinary time. A lot of controversy, a lot of problems. You remember the race at Spa, where he won, but did he not win? And in the end, we had to go to the FIA Salle du Comité, the court, to appeal, and we lost. And I remember being in the courtroom with Lewis Hamilton, and Lewis Hamilton being asked, you know, very hard questions by the Ferrari lawyer. And Lewis was still just a young man, still 23. But anyway, he won races, and then he won the championship, of course, in the most dramatic way in the history of Formula One, on the last corner of the last lap of the last race. And an extraordinary and amazing season it was. And I'm very proud to have worked with Lewis all that time, 5 years, because I worked from 2008 to 2012, when I stayed at McLaren, but he left and went to Mercedes, where he has achieved fantastic success. But now, if I look at him now, you know, he was in his 20s when I worked with him. He's now in his mid-30s. He's still a brilliant, brilliant driver, one of the greatest drivers we have ever seen. I think the 4 best drivers we have ever seen, my own opinion, my personal opinion, which you may disagree with, come in different eras of the sport. I will say Fangio, Juan Manuel Fangio in the 50s, sorry, the 1950s. Then I will say Jim Clark in the 1960s. Then I will say Ayrton Senna in the 1980s and 90s. And then I will say Lewis Hamilton now. And I think it's very difficult to separate them. And Lewis, on top of all of that, is also a big figure off track now. Not only the greatest driver in the world on track, which he is. I mean, there are some other wonderful drivers. Fernando Alonso is a wonderful driver. Sebastian Vettel is having a difficult time now, but he is a great driver. And we see other drivers who may well achieve a huge amount in the future, like Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc and others. But I think Lewis is number 1 now. And off track, he's also number 1. Some people don't like what he does. Black Lives Matter, end racism, We Race as One, all that kind of thing. But I do like it. I think he is using his fame and his platform to do something for mankind. You may disagree, you may not disagree. This is my view. I think that he is really acquiring a gravitas and a power as a man outside of sport. He's achieving sport at the highest level, but he's also achieving outside of sport. And the person who springs to my mind as an example that he is following is Muhammad Ali, the great boxer, who was, you know, among the very greatest boxers that there has ever been in the history of boxing, but also used his platform and his fame to push forward an agenda around political change. Some people didn't like it. Some people hated it, particularly in America. But I think now history judges Muhammad Ali as a great man. And I think history will judge Lewis Hamilton as a great man.
Do you think he'll continue after this year? And Toto Wolff, your opinion or what you know about it? Because there are talking about the Mercedes era with the 2 will end or not. What do you think and what do you know?
Well, I don't know for sure anything. I mean, I speak to Lewis. I don't speak to him, actually. I send him, you know, WhatsApp messages, but he sends me back. Sometimes he retweets me. It's very nice. It means my tweets are read by millions of people. Usually they are not. But if Lewis retweets them, they are. So, and I am in touch with him. But usually we talk about, not really about Formula One. And by the way, I'm not in regular touch. It might be once a month, a little exchange of messages. Or I say, well done, brilliant race, and he will reply. But, so I don't know for sure. I have no inside knowledge in that sense. But I personally think that they will continue. I think that Lewis Hamilton, and I would recommend it. I've talked to him about it in the past, some years ago. Don't stop too soon, Lewis. You know, you are very, very fit. You are very, very capable. You are very fast. You are very strong. You have all the experience now. And you can use all of those learnings to deliver more and more victories. Create a body of work, a magnum opus, which is greater even than that of Michael Schumacher. So yes, win a 7th world championship, win an 8th world championship, maybe a 9th or maybe a 10th, win 100 Grand Prix. I said the other day, how many Grand Prix will Lewis Hamilton end up with, wins? I was asked that question. I said more than Williams, but fewer than McLaren. McLaren have won 182 Grand Prix. Williams have won 114. I think he will win somewhere in between. A bit more than Williams. Isn't that amazing to think of one driver who will win more than Williams, when Williams were at one time one of the all-time great teams. Of course, he may not catch McLaren, but then some of the McLaren wins that McLaren has won. He won for them anyway. So I would say he will win 120 Grand Prix. He will win 8, 9 or 10 World Championships. He will leave the sport as the greatest record breaker of them all. And, you know, there was a time, we're going back a few years now, of course motor racing is dangerous. Of course you can hurt yourself. Of course you can even, we don't want to say the words, but you can have even a more serious thing than hurting yourself. But it is much safer than it used to be. It is. So whereas if we think back to some of the drivers who retired as soon as they could, won the championship and then left quite soon afterwards. I'm thinking about people like James Hunt and Jody Scheckter. And they openly admitted, I am retiring because I do not want to be killed. That's what they said. Well, that doesn't apply so much now. Yes, it's still dangerous, but not nearly so dangerous. So I would say to Lewis, do a few more years. You will still be seriously, brilliantly quick when you are 37, 39. Then think about stopping. And then think about what you're going to do for the next 50 years. And that's where I think will be a very, very interesting thing for us to watch. I will be dead at some point, but I will see some of it, and I'll be interested to watch some of it. What will Lewis Hamilton achieve in his 40s and his 50s? I think it will be very interesting to see.
You have worked with the 3 World Championships, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, and Jenson Button. 3 different drivers, 3 different persons. Which was the strange one, but in the way as this pilot, lived a Formula 1 career you have seen?
So they were all very different. 3 world champions, all very different. You know, in some ways the most conventional and, if you can say, normal of the 3 was Jenson Button. He won 1 world championship, much quicker and much more capable than many people say. People often think of Lewis Hamilton as just extremely intelligent, extremely analytical, extremely good when the conditions require careful thought, such as tyre degradation or tyre graining, or is it going to rain or is it not going to rain? Jenson Button always extremely good at that. And he was, but he was also quick. People forget it. When Kevin Magnussen, young Kevin Magnussen, came into the McLaren team, I think he thought, Jenson will be very hard to beat because he's so intelligent, he sets the car up so well, he does all the things that I just described so well, but I will be quicker than him. That's what Kevin thought. Wrong. Actually, Jenson was often quicker than Kevin. Kevin was sometimes quicker than Jenson. But Jenson often drove a lap and Kevin was surprised. And Kevin is quick. Anyway, so I would say that is, if you like, the most conventional, the most normal of the 3. Lewis, we have already talked about. Brilliant, brilliant driver on track and off track. Fernando Alonso, probably not quite as quick as Lewis in qualifying, but I'm talking about just a tiny, small amount. But on the Sunday in the race, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Among the best we have ever, ever, ever seen. But a complex character who has won 2 world championships and 32 Grand Prix, but it should have been more. It should have been twice the number. It should have been 64 Grand Prix and 4 world championships. And why was it not? He joined some of the teams at the wrong time. He's driven for all the good teams, McLaren, Ferrari, but never at the right time. He's never driven for Red Bull and Mercedes-Benz, which is the teams that have been winning in the last recent years. He never managed to join them. I think he probably tried, but he never managed to. And although he was a brilliant driver and is a brilliant driver and commands a lot of loyalty, he also creates difficulties. I mean, obviously at McLaren, he created a lot of difficulties. The first time, there were a lot of difficulties, and we've discussed that already around Spygate and the whole issue there. But then when he came back, the car was not good. The McLaren Honda was not a good combination. Not all Honda's fault, by the way. A lot of the problem was also McLaren. But anyway, he created difficulties. If we remember the famous scenes, of course, it's very entertaining. It's great for the media. It's great for the fans. We see him lying back on a deck chair on the side of the track because he knows that that image will be shown all around the world on television and social media. He uses the radio as he's driving because he knows that what he says will again be sent all the way around the world. GP2 engine. He knew what message he was giving.
The radio.
Yes, he used that very carefully and without fear. And whereas if I was giving a media briefing to Lewis, I would say, right, this is the press conference that's coming, or these are the interviews that are coming. This is what I suggest you should say, and this is why I think you should say it. He would mostly understand and accept, not always, but mostly. Jensen, always, not always, but mostly. Fernando would say, yeah, no problem, no problem. And then say something completely different. He would say what he wanted to say for his own reasons, often political. Now, if he was listening to this, would he disagree? I don't think so. I don't think so. We know why he sat on a deck chair. We know why he said GP2 engine. He knows that we know why he said those things and did those things. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's entertainment. We are in the entertainment business. This is Formula One. This is not, you know, war and death. This is sport and entertainment. And he's a brilliant driver, exciting in every way, very difficult to work with in that sense, because you never know what's going to happen and what surprise he's going to give you if you're working inside the team. But I treasure the times that I worked with him because of the excitement of the surprises. And I watch next year, I'll be very interested. I hope that the Alpine is a good enough car to showcase his talents. My fear is that he will turn 40 next year. And as he does so, he will be, you know, not bad, qualifying P8, P12, you know, scoring points occasionally, probably not podiums. If I'm wrong, don't shoot me.
I think in 2022 we'll have some more equality, and we'll see if Fernando, Max Verstappen, Lewis, if they will remain some good fights of the old times, because right now in this year, with the domination of Mercedes, the domination of Lewis Hamilton, we haven't not seen so many fights, but we'll see. Another question.
I will ask you a question. Let me ask you a question, because I'm interested in your view. I know you follow Fernando Alonso very closely. In 2022, you say you think it could be more level, and you may well be right. He will be 41. He will become 41 in 2022. Do you think he will still be young enough to deliver?
I think so. Like Kimi, like Lewis, like the pilots that right now are over 35, for their physical situation, for their intensity, for the thing that Fernando especially have done Dakar, have done Indy, have done other formulas. Fernando, but not only Fernando, should be competitive in the next years despite their age, because Formula One is different. The cars are like not a video game, but are not the Formula One of the 80s, of the 90s.
Yes.
And there are some more facilities. So I think, yes, he can battle with other pilots that are not so young, but I think so.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm looking forward to see.
We'll see.
We will see.
We'll see. Another question. You have been for 10 years Chief Communication Officer, Chief Media Officer of McLaren. Let's talk about how is the work of a Chief Communication Manager in a Formula One team. Some curiosity, some episodes, something that you can tell us about to have worked 10 years in such a team like McLaren?
Well, it changed enormously over the 10 years. When I arrived, McLaren, as I have said, was in trouble, or was just coming off the back of having been in trouble with the FIA, with a $100 million fine. The FIA president was Max Mosley, not the friend of Ron Dennis at all, the McLaren boss. And so it was very difficult and very political. And at that time, what we wanted to do was rebuild McLaren's reputation and rebuild the sponsors' confidence and the media's confidence in McLaren. And it was on national lines as well, because the British media had taken Lewis Hamilton's side. The Spanish media and the Italian media actually had taken Fernando Alonso's side, the Spanish, and Ferrari's side for the Italian. But actually it ended up being the same side. They were on the same side against McLaren. So that was complicated, and it took a while to rebuild that trust. And how do we do that? We just tried to be as honest and as clear and as helpful and as open as we could, which was not the normal style of McLaren and Ron Dennis. Ron Dennis is very closed, very formal, quite austere, quite frightening, some people found him. Journalists who interviewed him for the first time would be shaking when they went to interview him. And I used to say, relax, he's okay. But they were like, oh, Ron. Anyway, he is a complex character, Ron Dennis. So we had to do that. But then over the 10 years, what really changed, of course, was the explosion of social media. And if you're building storytelling, really, PR work, media work, communications work is storytelling. You're just trying to tell stories, trying to put the journalists in a place where they can see a story that you might like them to tell. Okay, they have their own editorial freedom, but if you can help them to see something, they may well write that story. So you're really talking about storytelling. But then when you get to the arrival of social media, you're doing a lot of direct storytelling, and it's very complicated and it's very fast. You know, I think of some of the things that went wrong, if you like, in my 10 years. The example, of course, at Spa. Lewis absolutely hated it if his teammate was faster than him. It isn't a common occurrence. But if it does happen, he hates it. By the way, so did Fernando. So did Ayrton Senna. All the great drivers hate it if their teammate is faster. So if you remember at Spa one year, I think one year, was it 2012? Jenson Button was brilliant that weekend. He put the car on the pole and he won the race. And Lewis was so upset and confused. Why am I not able to be as fast as Jenson Button at Spa, of all places, which is where drivers like to be fast, Spa. So he was very upset, and he put on Twitter the telemetry. He thought it was Jenson Button's telemetry, so he tweeted it to try to make a point to say that Jenson had a better setup. Actually, the trace that he tweeted was Oliver Turvey's telemetry from the simulator, so it wasn't even the correct thing. But nonetheless, he had said it was, and it created an absolute storm. Okay. And the moment I heard about it, I went straight to his room in the McLaren Brand Center. I knocked on the door. Lewis, oi, Lewis. And he opened the door. I said, Lewis, delete that tweet, delete that tweet. And he said, what? I said, delete the tweet. You know, which tweet? I said, come on, man, delete the tweet. You know the tweet. Anyway, and he took his phone and he kind of went like this. He went.
That way.
Satisfied? Yeah. Satisfied? Are you satisfied? I said, yes. Okay. And then that was all right. I knew I had a problem after that because it would become a big story and all the other teams would be looking at the telemetry. The engineers would be upset. As I walked out, Martin Whitmarsh was walking in. He said, well, what's happened? I said, he's deleted it. Anyway, he went in and still spoke to him. After that, I was dealing with the media. But that's an example of the kind of thing that happens that could not happen before social media. But once social media happens, it just immediately got out of control, you know. And yes, he deleted it, but of course people had screen grabbed it, and people tweeted it and tweeted it and tweeted it and tweeted it, and you can find it on the internet even now. And there were many examples like that. So, but again, I always used to think, I mean, I was quite well paid. I used to think, what an exciting job. If you love the sport, and I absolutely love the sport. I love the sport since I was a little boy. I love the history of the sport. I love it now. And to be working in the center of it in that way with some of the greatest drivers in the history of the sport, even if it was difficult, even if it was stressful, what a fantastic thing. I loved it. I did.
And why did you decide to leave that job if you have been you to leave it or not?
Well, you know, I had worked very closely with Ron Dennis. Ron Dennis personally hired me, and he and I worked very closely. We often had dinner, we often had coffees, we often had drinks, and we talked on the telephone, and of course we had meetings in the factory as well. We worked closely together, and I got on well with him. And Ron always operated with a small number of very close associates. That's how he liked to work. Of course, he needed all the mechanics and everybody, but he would like to have frequent meetings with a small number of people. And I suppose when things changed and Zach Brown arrived, I worked very well with Zach Brown for the first 6 months. But then after a while, I mean, look, he saw me, I think, as a bit of a Ron Dennis man, and he wasn't wrong. And there were a few others of us that the same thing applied to, and it was extremely amicable. In the end, we decided, look, you know, shall we just step away? And yeah, okay, you can step away. I said, okay, I will step away. And he gave me, or rather McLaren gave me a sum of money to step away. It's all very amicable, all very positive, all very good, and I was very happy.
What was your decision?
It was a mutual decision. But yes, it was my decision as well. It was a mutual decision. It was certainly my decision as well. And then at that point, I didn't go to university. I started working at the age of 18, and I was 54. I'm 57 now. I was 54 then. So I had worked from 18 to 54 with absolutely intense work, lots of traveling, all sorts of, I was exhausted. I was completely exhausted. They gave me a sum of money anyway, after all that time, McLaren. So I thought, what shall I do? And I didn't rush into work. I had talks with some other Formula One people, but I decided not to. And then I decided to write a novel. And I've written a novel which is nothing to do with Formula One at all. Absolutely, completely different subject. Because, you know, it's an interesting thing to do different things in life.
Writing,
and I thought, when
we never lose the passion to write and to counsel.
My dear chap, exactly. And I always thought I would like to write a novel. It has nothing to do with Formula One. And I thought, when next will I have both the time, therefore the ability to focus, and also the financial security, and not be busy working? Maybe not till I'm 70. And who knows if I will have the energy or the brain power when I'm 70 to do a novel. So I thought, no, I will do it now. And I spent about 8 months doing it. And that was very interesting. You can ask me about it if you want to, or not if you don't. It's up to you, it's your interview. But I then joined W Series. And I wanted a fresh challenge. You know, I love Formula One. I still love Formula One. I tweet about the history of Formula One. I love it. But
we follow you or your tweets, historical one with a birthday or some remembers, and I love focus on it because you are a storyteller and story memory to follow the story, because they are forgotten. The people follow the reality, the day by day, but many times they don't remember, they don't know what happened in the past.
Well, this is why I like doing my on this day tweets. On this day, this happened. On this day, this driver was born. On this day, this driver was won the Italian Grand Prix. On this day, the driver died. And of course, sometimes it is Stirling Moss and Ayrton Senna and, you know, Emerson Fittipaldi. But also, it is sometimes drivers that drove one Grand Prix or failed to qualify for 2 Grand Prix and never managed to start any, and died on this day in 1967. Well, I think it's nice to honor them by finding a picture and tweeting about them. And you know, sometimes I then get a direct message on Twitter, hello, I am that driver's granddaughter. I saw the tweet and I burst into tears. I was so happy to see my old grandfather remembered. How nice.
Writing to you, telling
yes, how nice.
It's very nice, and should start a relationship where people connected with those people involved in Formula One. Ron Dennis is missing to Formula One, and Formula One is missing Ron Dennis?
Yeah, look, Ron Dennis is now 73. So I don't think he would like to be working in Formula One now. Formula One is, you know, incredibly hard work. I know Bernie Ecclestone went on and on and on, but he didn't run a team. He ran a small, special, and as you say, special case. But, and by the way, Helmut Marko also is not a young man. So, you know, of course there are people like that. And Ron is still very fit. But I don't have a lot of contact with Ron Dennis now, but I have the occasional text message. And he is very busy building a new house in England. He always seems very happy and contented. He did some charity work during the COVID-19 first lockdown here. He did some work to try to make sure that the health workers, the doctors and the nurses, always had food available. And you know, he's a clever man and an innovative man. So I don't think he's missing Formula One. And by the way, he won more world championships and more Formula One championship Grand Prix than anyone, more than Enzo Ferrari, more than Colin Chapman. You know, this is a man who has an enormous body of success behind him. I don't think Formula One misses him in the sense that Formula One should offer him a job. No, but what I actually think is that he's not remembered with enough veneration. You know, he is as successful as anyone we has ever seen in this sport. And I just mentioned Enzo Ferrari and Colin Chapman. He is up there with them, but I often don't see him described in that light. He is one of the all-time greats. I'm very, very proud to have worked with him. And I wish that he was recognized as one of the all-time greats. Also in England, as you know, we have a strange system. If you are successful, you become Sir Frank Williams. And then you can become Lord something else. You know, we have a silly country in this way. He should be Sir Ron Dennis. You know, it is Sir Jackie Stewart. It was Sir Stirling Moss. It is Sir Frank Williams. Why should it not be Sir Ron Dennis? You're muted, I think.
Yeah, talking about the McLaren and the English historical team, we saw what happened to Williams, and we are showing what's happening to McLaren in sense that they have put in cell the McLaren Technology Center where you have worked many years. What does it mean, the crisis, the problem for those historical teams?
Well, in some ways they are similar. You know, for many, many years they were run by one extraordinary person, Frank Williams, Ron Dennis, who were personal friends, very, very English, you know, in every single way that you can use that word. And for many years, they were super successful. All the way through the 80s, it was either Williams or McLaren was winning. basically. That was it, Williams or McLaren. And then I think, obviously, we had the hugely successful time of Ferrari with Michael Schumacher. Then there was a little bit of success for McLaren again with Mika Häkkinen. Brilliant driver, by the way. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant driver. And then we had the whole regime of Red Bull and Mercedes-Benz. And I think in that time, probably both Williams and McLaren slipped back. I think they didn't have the enormous funding that those teams had. Red Bull obviously had the funding of Red Bull. Mercedes had the funding of Mercedes. And Ferrari had the funding of Philip Morris, Marlboro cigarettes. And those three teams had that extraordinary advantage, financial advantage. And the conventional business model of McLaren and Williams, which was conventional sponsorship, was not raising the money sufficient to compete at that level. Still good, but not that level. And gradually, slowly, almost without noticing it, I think, those two teams, those two great British teams, began to slip behind. And they didn't necessarily know, because they didn't necessarily know all of the equipment that all of those other teams had. Because why would Ferrari and Red Bull and Mercedes inform them? They would not. When I was at McLaren, and I left only 3 years ago, people said the McLaren simulator was the best. Now Andreas Seidel openly describes it as not state of the art anymore. That didn't take long. Progress is fast in Formula One, and McLaren and Williams slipped behind. Williams more. Williams obviously more. Williams got had some very bad times, and obviously the latest thing we have seen is that the family has had to sell. And let's see what this new group, Doralton Capital, has. I very much hope they invest, and I very much hope that they manage to put the team back on the right footing, but it will be difficult. As regards McLaren, you know, McLaren is not just a Formula One team. It is also a high-performance road car, sports car manufacturer. And this recession around COVID-19 has not made that easy. You know, absolutely not. And all the companies that make such cars are struggling, and McLaren no different. So I think that we know, I mean, they've even said quite openly that they have had financial problems, and that they had to raise a bond, and that they had to ask the existing shareholders, principally the Bahrainis, therefore, for further injection of funds. And the Bahrainis provided that, very loyal owners. And then we had the more recent thing you just asked me about, which is the McLaren Technology Centre, the great building that, as you say, I worked in for 10 years. But I think
is the installation and the name of that place.
But they will not leave it. They will sell it, and it will be a lease back. So they will not relocate. I should think it is a revenue generating idea. Whether it works, I'm not a financier. I wouldn't be expert to say. But when people read a headline, oh, McLaren is selling the technology centre, they then assume they will be working in a small shed somewhere. No, they will still be working in the technology centre, albeit
the place.
A lease back. And look, again, just like Williams, I hope that McLaren, I have lots of good friends still at McLaren, very good friends. And I very much hope that they successful. And just the other day, obviously, like everybody in Formula One, I was excited and pleased for Pierre Gasly when he won very, very exciting race. And of course, it's hugely exciting to see a young man who nobody expected to win the race finally get his chance. And it was very, you know, moving to see him in tears and so on, and maybe offering the win to Antoine Hubert and so on. All of that was very emotional. But I will be honest, Carlos Sainz was so close behind, and even though I don't work for the team anymore, I was in my mind as I was watching it, come on, Carlos, come on, come on. I wanted still to see McLaren win. And I always will.
Yeah, and we saw McLaren trying to do something, Arrow McLaren in the Indy, and right now we see the WEC. There should be the possibility to see McLaren involved. And talking about McLaren ambient, I had the pleasure to stay some weekends of race in your hospitality with you and with Silvia Hofer, that right now is working in Ferrari, and what you can say about this woman that I think is one of the beloved in Formula One, like the others woman, and then we'll go to the woman series working in Formula One.
Well, you know, I was a journalist for years, and Silvia Hoffa Frangipani was working for Williams as a PR officer, a press officer there. And then when I had an opportunity to hire somebody, I joined McLaren, and I thought, I will try and hire Silvia. And I telephoned her and invited her to come to London. We paid, McLaren paid. She lives in Italy, of course. She came to London, in Chelsea. We put her in a nice hotel, and then I went and had breakfast with her the next morning. And I explained what I would like her to do, to join us, and so on. And straight away, I think she was excited. Because although Williams, she loved it, but McLaren was a step up, you know. And our two drivers were Lewis Hamilton and Jenson Button, both world champions. Exciting. And, you know, I loved working with Silvia. I did work with her for about 8 years. Brilliant woman. And one of the best things that Ferrari have done in recent years is hire Silvia. I mean, they haven't done a lot of very good things recently. They hired Charles Leclerc and they hired Silvia Hoffa Frangipani. Two very good signings.
And we Italians, the tifosi, hoping to see again Ferrari good with a good car on track. We'll see when it should be.
Yes. It's an astonishing thing, isn't it? You know, I don't know when you're actually going to present this this interview, but if I may say so, it is recorded on the 22nd of September. 22nd of September, you know me, and on this day. So on this day, exactly 1 year ago, in Singapore, Sebastian Vettel won for Ferrari. Will that be the last Grand Prix victory of his entire career? Maybe. And when will Ferrari win again? Well, maybe not very soon.
We'll see, because there are this domination, Red Bull, and then Mercedes. There has been the domination of Ferrari, and in Italy, Maranello. They are hoping, first of all, to do a good car, and I think we have to wait 2022 at least, because next year,
yes,
few things will change, so there not should be the possibility to develop a different and better car. And talking about a woman, like a media manager like Silvia Hofer, and saying that fortunately in Formula One, if you look in the garage, if you look in the hospitality, for sure, but in the motorhomes, we see more women added as engineer, and mechanic, and media manager. They are, I think, half of the 10 teams with women. So it's nice to see that there is more equality, and your step in 2017 was to join the adventure of the women's series, like media officer, chief, but Bishop the chief. What the experience, what the objective, what's the future of this formula, with many people saying, no, the women have to race with the men, not in a separate way. Others saying, no, they have to do a own series.
Well, yes. Look, I arrived in as one of the founders of W Series. You know, I left McLaren, which was a big team, and I joined W Series when it was absolutely tiny, 3 or 4 people. Now it's still not a lot of people, 15. We hire more people on a temporary basis for each race, etc. When we announced ourselves, or rather when I announced, because it was a tiny team, 3 people, when I arranged the press announcement in October of 2018, so I made some arrangements on a secret basis with journalists with whom I have long relationships. And of course, we created a video and a social media program and so on. And when we pressed the button, I wondered how much media coverage we would have. It went crazy. We had enormous media coverage. We had coverage all over the UK, all over Spain, all over France, all over Germany, all over the United States, Argentina, Brazil, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, China, India. I was astonished. We had, my inbox was going crazy with requests for interviews. Our social media platforms immediately built up fast. So at that moment, I realized we were onto something, and maybe that the world was ready and the timing was right, because women's sport was about to explode. And of course, we saw the World Cup, the Women's World Cup, which was suddenly extremely popular, much more popular than women's football had ever been before that. And yes, I hear your question. There were people who said, but why? You don't need to. Women should be able to race alongside men. Well, my answer to that is that Formula One had been going for 70 years, 70 years, founded in 1950, the World Championship. And in all of that time, Formula One had been open and available to men and women. But in all of that time, out of the 900, I think it's about 900, Formula One drivers that had actually started World Championship Formula One Grand Prix, of the 900, only two had been women. And the last one, Lilla Lombardi, in 1976, 44 years ago. And the one before that, Maria Teresa de Filippis, in 1958, 62 years ago. So it's not getting better, it's getting worse. So what did we think we needed to do? We thought what we will do is do something innovative, disruptive. Of course it will be unpopular with some people, of course. And it was. But what we would like is that our champions, our best drivers, will go forward and reintegrate at a higher level, because we use Formula 3 cars, but then they would go on up, next step, International FIA Formula 3, next step, Formula 2, using the skills that they had learned at W Series and that they would never have had a chance to learn had they not had the W Series experience. And then, yes, I'm not going to predict the future, but one day, maybe in 3 years, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 7 years, if one of our graduates, one of our drivers, ends up racing in Formula One, what a fantastic achievement that would be. What a fantastic achievement. And if she ended up doing well, she would be one of the biggest sports stars in the world, bar none, right up there. She would be up there with the biggest basketball players in America, with the biggest football players in Spain, with the biggest cricketers, if you excuse me from talking of this strange sport called cricket, in England. And of course, up there with Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen and Fernando Alonso.
Right now there is the project, the possibility, the news that is growing up that the women's series races in Europe at least should join the weekends of Formula One. It should work and it should help the series to grow up, and one world to see the other, and hoping that in the future.
Well, it is not yet decided. It is not yet decided. What we have decided, and is already confirmed for 2021, is that we will certainly have a season. We will be back bigger and better. And it is already confirmed that we will have at least 2 races on the Formula One calendar, which is Austin, Texas, and Mexico City. Already confirmed, definitely agreed and announced. Will we have any more? Perhaps, perhaps. We will have more races. I'm sure we will have 8 races at least. Will the other 6 be with Formula One? Will they be with DTM, who we had as an excellent partner last year, 2019? Or will they be with other series? Because there are many other series who are coming to us now saying, please, please, we would like to talk to you about having your races on our platform. It is not yet decided. I am not being secretive. It is not yet decided. But we are discussing, and we are expecting to finalize it in the next few, I don't know, weeks or months. Of course, the COVID-19 situation doesn't make it easier, but that applies to everything.
Interrogative, and we know no news for sure right now. 2 last questions. How many drivers will run in the 2029 winning series?
2021? How
many drivers do you have?
Probably 20. Probably 20 drivers. I mean, in our first year, 2019, we had 18 to begin with 2 reserves. And sometimes we ended up doing 19 car races and even 20 car races. So it will be something like that. Probably 20, I would imagine.
And the last one, a question that I asked to all my guests: what will do Matt Bishop when he's grown up?
I'm already 57. How old do you want me to be? I'm already old.
I'm asking to you.
Look, I have had a great career.
Some project, some strange idea.
Okay, I answer you. I have had a great career. I've worked in Formula One for 25 years. I'm now working in W Series. I would love to see W Series go on to become even more successful, perhaps to become in the way that I've described. You know, it is good that we will already be on the 2021 Formula One calendar. That is a good relationship. Obviously, it marries my past experience with Formula One with my new project with Catherine Bomyor, Dave Ryan, Sean Wadsworth, David Coulthard at W Series. And I would very much like to see it succeed, very, very much, properly succeed. And I would love to see one of our drivers or more actually becoming successful at the highest level. I think you have to aim high, and so that is an aim. How long will that take? Maybe 2 years, 4 years, 6 years? I don't know. Let's say it takes 6 years, by which time I will be 63. You know, I don't know if I want to. I know some people do. We talked about Helmut Marko, obviously Bernie Ecclestone, very special case. But do I want to be going to 20 countries a year or even 10 countries a year, you know, as I go through my 60s? Maybe not, maybe not. And I have written one novel, which was published on August the 28th. And if any of your viewers are good in English and would like to buy it, then it is called The Boy Made the Difference, and it is available on Amazon. Nothing to do with Formula One, though, so don't expect Formula One. It's a different story. It's a different story.
And the way.
But I would like to. Pardon?
And then the other.
So I would like, perhaps, maybe as in my 60s or even in my 70s, you know, it is not a plan, but it is a dream, maybe to relax into retirement writing fiction. That would be an idea.
We'll wait all your future rights, novels, what you are going to produce. Matt Bishop, really a pleasure to have you with me in this talk, hoping there will be another occasion to talk about Formula One and many other things. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon.